Okay, we're live. Good afternoon, good evening, Richard. Thank you once again for joining us on this little watch channel. Much appreciate your time. I did a video. I don't know if you saw it. I borrowed briefly Stephen's Omega Speedmaster, the Moonwatch, and I made a brief comment on there, which I know was more tongue-in-cheek and certainly wasn't factual. So this is something that we will discuss briefly here. And in there, obviously, I mentioned that the Omega won the contract to be the watch to go to the moon, and that obviously, Rolex didn't. And I think I made a joke saying, or maybe Omega was the cheaper option and Rolex was too expensive. That was obviously a very tongue-in-cheek comment. I'm sure you know a hell of a lot more about the history, just a brief history and thoughts on Omega, Rolex, and any other watches that went to the moon, why one did, one didn't, and thoughts like that. So far away, Richard, and we'll just have a conversation on that for a little while.
Well, first off, thanks so much for having me, brother. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank
you. Well, actually, and this happens a lot, and it's easy to say and to drop, but it's very hard to verify. And that was that, Omega basically, but they dropped their pants to get, to become the Moonwatch, okay, right, or NASA's selection. However, be that as it may, the Omega was the only watch they submitted initially. They sent out 10 requests. Okay, it's right, RFPs, requests for product, and only 4 manufacturers responded: Omega, Rolex, Hamilton, and Longines.
Got you.
And Hamilton, for what, and they specified, as the government does, they had a spec sheet and they wanted chronographs. Hamilton, for whatever reason, submitted a pocket watch.
Right.
Okay, so end of them. So now they're down to 3. And this was pre, because I don't have privy to the numbers and stuff now. I'm in a place where I can't get to anything, but the Cosmograph was the 6239. This is pre-Daytona. And then Wittnauer, Longines, their professional chronograph, and then the Omega Speedmaster, which I remember it was a 105. You'll have to excuse me because I'm not nearly as up to snuff on Omega as I am Rolex.
No, that's
but it
fine.
was a 105 point something. Okay, so bottom line was they had problems. The Omega had the Rolex had problems with humidity. It quit working and the crystal popped off. Longines also failed the temperature test and it had a warped, and then it fell off. It right, warped and then fell off. Right. And so Omega was the only man standing. And so, that's how they went. Now, in fairness, these tests, nobody knew. The other manufacturers really, I give Omega credit for preparing for the worst because, nobody ever made a watch that went through this type of testing that was going to be exposed to this type of environment,
right,
for daily usage. So, in all fairness, because, Rolex wanted a second go round, but, they said, this ain't baseball. You don't get 3 swings, you're out.
All right.
And then, and even Omega had some problems with that first generation with detached crystals, because that's why Scott ended up going to his Bulova, was when the crystal popped. And I do know that on their second generation, they moved the tachometer inside the crystal versus in the first gen, it was, outside the crystal, mm-hmm, on basically the bezel. But that's basically, that's how that came to be, and how Omega, basically how Omega got that contract.
Right. Okay. So
So,
if Rolex had have been able to enter again, so obviously you mentioned that NASA said to Rolex, it's a one-shot go. You can't go again. If Rolex had have been able to have gone again, do you think that they would have stood a chance second time round? Would they have learnt quickly enough, in your experience?
I I doubt it, only because but who knows? Maybe they could have to get through the testing, because if you only have to produce one watch, or say two watches examples, you can concentrate all your resources, both human, technological, and material, on those two pieces.
Right.
Okay, now to produce those all to the same specs, all to the same performance level, and ship them out, no, absolutely not. But
Right.
could they have come up with a watch? I guess you would have to obviously work on, but it could come down to the materials, because as far as, even though, it was the plexi crystal, they use different grades, they use different types. Some reacted to heat better than others, some reacted to cold better, so it's not just a matter of, use better glue, use better epoxy, get it, just glue the son of a bitch down, so that you got to get a freaking commercial jackhammer to get it off. It wasn't that simple. So no, I don't think Rolex could have, to answer your question.
Right. Okay.
Plus, nor should they have. I mean, they all had the same rules. They all knew what the game. Everybody knew, and it didn't work for them.
Right. Okay. Okay. So what was it about the Amiga that specifically worked so well? What was it they got right? You may have even answered this. So
well, it worked under extreme conditions,
Right, okay.
because the chronograph was very important as far as timing. Whether it had to do with certain procedures as far as firing on their engines,
Right.
whether it had to do with them being outside. If I'm trying to think back, I don't know if they went on any spacewalks on that, or if it was a straight to the moon and back. But they time a lot of things in a day, and
Right. Yeah.
even though they had clocks and they had everything in the ship, those guys, because I never talked to an astronaut, but I've talked to and had customers that were, aviators, fighter and bomber aviators, and they used their watches like more than what they had in front of them in the cockpit. They depended, they really, even though it was supposedly backup, they really, glanced at their wrist. And that was their lifeline. So, Omega they built the best product at the time.
Right, at the time, yeah. And would they have been able to? Because obviously the die, actually, just by chance, obviously this is the the Rolex version. But when they're in their spacesuits and things like that, would they have been able to? I mean, assumably, obviously, their eyes would have been better than ours because we're a bit older. We may need glasses and things like that. Would they have been able to see those tiny dials in their spacesuits and things? And would they have been able to have worked the buttons and things like that? Would that have come into what they were having to do?
Well,
with spacesuits and gloves, could they? And is that also why bombarding you? So, and is that also why with the? Mind you, obviously this is the newest one. This one has the the lockdown timer thing. I'm guessing with those back then they didn't have those lockdown things. I can't imagine trying to undo that.
Right.
When you
no, they did not.
Right.
Well, yes, that would be significant, and that really wasn't a problem because they could hit. Rolex's buttons were fine. The Wittnauer Longines apparently were fine. I never really heard that much or found anybody that knew that much about that particular, that particular example. But the Rolex and the Omega, they had no problem with them as far as, being able to hit the buttons, being able to read the dials. Things were, because those guys gave a lot of feedback.
Right. Okay.
You know, the astronauts gave a lot of feedback on those. And ironically, Dave Scott, and this came to me from an Omega designer who was there at the time. He was younger then, but he was older when I met him. But Scott was sort of upset because Omega didn't really, he had some concerns, ironically, about the crystal. And Omega sort of poo-pooed him and basically said, you know, this has met the approval of your bosses, and you stick to flying and, you know, walking on the moon and doing spacewalks, and let us worry about the watch. Well, he said something to Bulova, and Bulova, because that specific watch, which ended up being auctioned, and it was the most expensive Longines ever sold at auction. In fact, it was the only one of any of the moon watches that ever, because those were all government property.
Right.
Some people may not know that, but those, you know, so those all went back to NASA, went back to the, you know, none of those guys got to keep those. But obviously Scott kept his. But that was a one-off that Bulova made for him. Specifically, you know, for him, for space.
Right. Okay.
And, you know, it didn't go through any of the testing, but it did what it had to do, you know, come game time. And it still looked great at auction.
Right.
You know, there were no problems with it.
Okay. And trying to think of something else. Obviously, there was Saturn 1, 2, 3, 4. Obviously, Saturn 13 was the one that they made the film and they tried to land on the moon and they couldn't. So my history of the Saturn project is very limited. I believe, and I don't know, but my guess is maybe like Saturn, was it maybe like 1 to 5? They just flew but didn't land on the moon. Do you know which one landed on the moon? And is that the one that had the watch, or did they have to go a few times waiting for the watch, or was the watch, or did the watch go up on Saturn 1 before it even went on the moon?
I do not know. I did it one time, but I've been out of the business for 15 years, and between age and I'm taking medications, my memory is shot. I know I can't give you specific flights. I know. I don't even want to guess. No, I'd be guessing because I'm trying to surmise. I'm trying to think, and I can't recall. I had the number. But I don't want to take a wild, you know, I'll be like all the other idiots on YouTube that they don't know something. So they just, oh yeah, they were there from Saturn 1 to 5. Yes, absolutely. I do not recall.
No, that's fine. Well, trust me to put you on the spot on that one. I always want to try something, try and catch you out or something.
No, that's, you know, that's fine. Omega, you know, they make a super watch. I really love their vintage watches. Ironically, more of their dress watches. But I really never, we were talking a little bit, Pittsburgh is not a big Omega town, or it was not when I was in the business. And I just never, you know, it was Rolex for me. That's what we worked on. That's what we sold. That's what I wore, what I still wear to this day. You know, but Omega makes a hell of a watch.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
And do you have any Omega watches?
Now I only have, let's see. Yeah, I have one, I believe. At one time I had 13, but I've either gifted or sold them. I have a number of vintage. I probably have a dozen, 12, 13 in there of their vintage watches. But no, modern, I have one.
Just one.
Yeah, it's, you know, because like I said, and this is just me, but if I'm looking at my drawer, and I see, you know, I got my Rolexes on one side, I got my Omega on the other. I know what I'm going to grab every time. You know, but that's me. I got issues. I admit it. I got issues, you know, so I'm not, you know, the guys that love Omega don't. I'm not saying anything against Omega. I just, you know, they never were my cup of tea.
Yeah. All right. I got one other question then, because I know you're going to have to go in about 5 minutes or so. So I'll just put you on the spot one more time. We'll see. This is more of a Rolex question, but kind of Omega too. Obviously, the deep sea, because 1 minute we went up, so let's go down. So did the deep sea, did that happen before the Moonwatch or after the Moonwatch, give or take a bit? It would have been after, wouldn't it? Because the
Wait, you mean the Sea Dweller? The Deep Sea was basically, that was way after. The Sea Dweller was after, and then because I wear my most worn diver is I call it Cami, but the Jack Cameron Deep Sea Dweller.
And that's the 44mm, isn't it?
Yes,
is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I wear the most. And then probably I wear my Sea Dweller Red occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
And then of my subs, probably my 5513, which is a circa 81. It was my first self-purchased luxury watch.
Right.
And I bought it pre-owned. I got it in 84. It was an 81. It was the first watch I bought from a man who would become my mentor, teacher, and then my business partner. But I bought that in 84. But I'd say 90% of the time, I have it on today. I wear the Jack Cameron. I just love that watch. And I like the size of it. I like, in some guys, it's too bulky. I get that. And I have the first gen. They're on the third now. But it doesn't bother me because I've looked at both. I had the opportunity to buy, second or the latest, and I put them on, I wore them, and I don't see the difference. I don't feel the difference.
Right. Yes.
And I'm good with it. But that came. Sorry to get off on a tangent, but that came later. That was further down the road when they introduced the Sea Dweller, and then the Deep Sea was after that.
Right. Yeah, I thought so. All right. I think we better just finish up. Well, we had about 2 or 3 people popping on. We just do sort of very short streams because Richard has his life and his things that he has to deal with, and hopefully, Richard, I'll keep you on. I'll end the broadcast in a second, but I'll keep you on so I can just say goodbye to you.
Sure.
And then I'll let you go on. And just thank you to those who watch now. I'll post this on some of the social media sites. So if anyone pops on and watches this in the future, thanks for watching. And obviously, we're a very small channel, so we don't get that much traction. But if you have any questions or anything like that, post them in the comments here or something like that. And as and when we get Richard back on again, in the future, then, we may have a question from a viewer or something like that might be interested. But thank you very much for everybody watching. And thank you, Richard, for popping on. So do you want to say toodaloo, Richard?
Yeah, no. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thanks a lot for whoever was watching. Thanks much for taking the time.
Yeah, much appreciated.
Have a great weekend.
Yes, thank you very much, Richard. I'll end the live stream and then I'll just see you just for 2 seconds. Thanks very much, everybody. See you all again next time. Thank you for taking the time to watch. All right, let's just